and welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. Today we're going to talk about Mary of Guelders.
One day we will be remembered.
Mary of Guelders was born around 1432. I found a lot of birth years, actually, so I don't know exactly. So we are going to go with about 1432. Her father was Arnold, Duke of Guelders, and her mother was Catherine of Cleves. Her parents had been married just a couple of years earlier at the ages of 19 and 12. Yikes. Now they were 21 and 14, and they were having a baby. Enter Mary of Guelders. As a young girl, she was sent to live at the Burgundian court with her mother's uncle, Philip the Good, Duke of Burgundy, where marriage negotiations began, but faltered because her parents didn't have a suitable dowry. In lieu of a marriage, Mary needed a job, a noble job. She was made lady-in-waiting to her great-uncle's daughter-in-law, Catherine of France. Catherine was about 4 years older than Mary. While Mary attended Catherine, Mary also had ladies to attend her, 10 ladies to attend her. She was living fairly extravagantly. Her great-aunt and uncle still wanted to get Mary married, but there was still an issue with dowry. Her great-uncle, Philip, agreed to pay her dowry, whilst his wife agreed to pay for her trousseau. With the dowry now substantial, plans were made to marry Mary, now 17, to the King of Scots, James II, aged 19. Mary was escorted to Scotland to marry the teenage king. Her escort? William Crichton. Do you remember William Crichton? He was one half of the dynamic duo responsible for planning the Black Dinner. Yikes. But that was 9 years ago, so let's hope he's a safer guy to be around. A tournament was held in Bruges to celebrate her departure from France. Mary landed safely in Scotland in June 1449. She made her way slowly toward her future husband, stopping at abbeys and shrines, but the following month, in July, she married James II, King of Scots. Remember the little boy at the Black Dinner crying and begging for his cousin's life? And immediately after the wedding, Mary was crowned and proclaimed Queen of Scots. There was a huge wedding banquet given, and Mary received many gifts from her new husband James. The castles and lands given to her by the king made her not just the Queen of Scots, but also independently wealthy. The young royal couple had their first baby 10 months after their wedding, a prince, who died the same day he was born, May 19th. Mary was pregnant again just 5 months later. This had to be scary for teenage Mary. Her first baby hadn't survived. Would this one? Her husband was busy. He had taken control of his country, and he had Livingstone and his family arrested. Livingstone, the other half of the Black Dinner dynamic duo. And they were attainted and their lands were taken. Lands and titles reverted to the crown. King James II was an adult now, and he was a little angry. The royal baby was born July 10th, 1451. They named him Prince James, after his father. Now that Livingstone was dead, King James was moving on to his next target. He invited William Douglas over for dinner. William's father had been the man that had benefited from the murders of the Black Dinner. William had only been about 15 then, but now he was in his 20s, and he had some friends that the king didn't trust. William only agreed to come to dinner if he was provided a letter of safe conduct, and the king provided one. So William put aside his worries that this was the second Black Dinner and arrived for dinner with the king. At dinner, the king demanded William stop his associations with his shady pals. William refused. You're not the boss of me. Don't tell me what to do. I can be friends with who I want to be friends with. So King James stabbed him to death. Once the stabbing began, the king's men rushed in and helped the king finish William off, and then they threw his body out the window because no body, no crime, I guess.
Nobody, no crime, but I ain't letting up until the day I die.
William Douglas's body was found with 27 stab wounds. But also, his father had probably given the king that idea 9 years ago at the Black Dinner. Maybe it wasn't a good idea to make a child watch the murder of other children. Maybe it doesn't usually end well. Just a thought. About 5 months after Black Dinner the remake, Queen Mary was pregnant again. The 14th of May, 1453, the Queen gave birth to another healthy baby, Princess Mary, probably named after her mother. The royal family now consisted of 23-year-old King James II, 21-year-old Queen Mary, and their children, Prince James and Princess Mary. 2 James and 2 Marys is not confusing at all. In May the following year, Queen Mary was pregnant again, but she was also with her husband while he laid siege to Blackness Castle. He won that castle and gave it to Mary immediately as a gift. Guys, they seemed like they were really in love. Later that year, they had their third child, Prince Alexander. They had an heir and a spare and a daughter. But they seemed to enjoy spending time together. They are giving off Edward III and Philippa of Hainault vibes. The year after Alexander was born, the royal couple added Prince David. And the year after that, Prince John. And a couple of years later, Princess Margaret. A couple of years later, the royal family were now 29 and 27. They still liked spending time together, and they were probably trying for another baby at this point. King James was away. He had Roxburgh Castle under siege. He was making up for the lost time of his minority. Now, King James was a big fan of artillery, explosive artillery. They were moving away from catapults and on to bigger and better weapons. James II, King of Scots, was standing next to one of these artillery at the siege when one of the cannons exploded. As the king stood near a piece of artillery, his thigh bone was dug in two with a piece of misframed gun that broke in shooting, by which he was stricken to the ground and died hastily. The Scots continued with the siege and won the castle 3 days later. Dowager Queen Mary ordered it to be destroyed. The king is dead. Long live the king. The new king was Mary's 9-year-old son, King James III, King of Scots. Are you seeing the pattern? All of the James Stuarts have become king as children. Scotland was on her third child king in a row. Mary was now the Dowager Queen and a single mother of 6, ages 2 through 9. So that sucked. Mary founded Trinity College in memory of her husband. She loved him, and she was definitely in mourning. Mary became regent for her son, so I guess while the Scottish weren't willing to trust an English woman to be regent, they were willing to trust a French one. Their history wasn't as complicated. Luckily, England had just started a civil war of their own, and they were busy. It's Wars of the Roses times, guys. If you remember from season 1, the Lancastrians and the Yorkists were fighting over power of the country. Just after the death of her husband, Queen Mary had some unexpected guests. The Queen of England, Margaret of Anjou, fled England, seeking refuge in Scotland with her son Prince Edward. We've talked about Dowager Queen Mary before, in Margaret of Anjou's episode. She fled England to seek refuge with the Dowager Queen Mary of Scotland, and that is where we are. Queen Mary took in the refugee queen and prince. The two women started planning, one queen to another. Queen Mary decided to aid Queen Margaret, hoping that she would win, and they could be allied queens, making the island safer for both of their sons. They also agreed to betroth Mary's 8-year-old daughter, Mary, to Margaret's 8-year-old son, Edward. If the Lancasters won, Princess Mary would be the next Queen of England, and Scotland would get the Tower of Berwick back. But the York faction made friends with the Burgundians, Queen Mary's family, the family that had taken care of her and made her the Queen of Scotland. So things between Mary and Margaret got weird. Queen Mary was like, you know what? Never mind. We can't be gal pals. My family picked the other side. And then the new York king proposed to Dowager Queen Mary. He was really trying to nail down that Burgundian alliance and trying to get a Scottish alliance in the process. Queen Mary was by now 29 and King Edward was just 19. She declined, and I'm kind of impressed. Word on the street was that Edward was very attractive and tall, and now king. Dowager Queen Mary was living her best single girl life and not interested in a teenage husband. Mary's uncle pressured her to break any alliance she had made with Margaret. And Queen Mary ended up paying Margaret and her entourage to leave Scotland. Queen Mary and Scotland were making peace with King Edward in England. The word on the street was that the Queen had relationships with several men. Was it true? I don't know. Maybe it was. If it was, you go, girl. It's been a rough few years. Live your best single lady life. But she didn't have a long time to enjoy the single life. She died the 1st of December, 1463, at the age of just 31. Give or take, because again, I have quite a few possible birth years. There's a range. I don't know what she died of. Likely illness, because she was still so young. She was survived by at least 5 of her children. 12-year-old King James III, 10-year-old Princess Mary, 9-year-old Prince Alexander, 8-year-old Prince David, and 7-year-old Prince John. She had died just 3 years after her husband, and for the 3rd time in a row, the child King of Scots was orphaned before he was old enough to be king on his own. And that is where I'll leave it for now. What did you think of Mary of Guelders? She had an interesting life, for sure. I can't imagine what it would have been like to be married to her husband. He seemed to love her, but he was also raised with a lot of childhood trauma, and he did things like invite his cousin for dinner and stab him and throw him out a window. So he seemed to have a bit of a temper. He had a nickname. His fiery nickname either came from his birthmark that covered a large portion of the half of his face, or his temper, maybe both. He doesn't seem like he was a very calm man, and he really liked cannons. But I think Mary did great. She managed to be regent for the 3rd child king in a row. Scotland's got a bumpy road. You can share your thoughts with me at longlivethequeenpodcast@gmail.com or on Facebook or Instagram at longlivethequeenpodcast. Long live to all the queens out there, and until next week, bye.
Will be remembered.
Thanks for listening.